Okay, thank you very much, Hannah. Hi, everyone. I can't actually see anyone or really know if I'm talking to anyone other than myself here, but I'm hoping that I am. So my name is Richard Golsworthy. I'm the program leader for the Counselling Psychology program. And so, yeah, I'll say a little bit about that. And I'm not quite sure how this particular interface works because I've not used it before. So you can, I think, put questions into a chat. I don't know if you can speak. I can't see an option for you speaking, and I certainly can't see anyone. But if you can speak to me, then please feel free to speak. But if you can't, then you can just obviously put questions as they come up into the Q&A at the top right of the screen. So what to say about the program? A sort of general introduction, I guess. First of all, the program is 3 years full time, and in coming in at stage one, then it's pretty busy right away. You've got in stage one of the sort of key therapeutic model that you learn is person-centered therapy. And there's a significant amount of intensive training in that model during the course of trimester A and trimester B. And although you don't start placement right away, because we take into the program some people who have previous qualifications in counselling or some other kind of therapy, but it's not a necessary prerequisite for the program. So many people are starting their therapeutic journey from scratch on entering the program, as may be the case for yourself, and that's fine. And so you obviously need to go through a significant amount of training and practice and understanding of ethical principles of person-centered therapy specifically before we get you into starting placement practice. We have what's called a readiness to practice assessment, which takes place usually towards the end of trimester A, so around sort of late November, early December, which is just making sure that you're, in a good state to get out into placement practice with real clients, as opposed to the triad work with colleagues that you undertake in the program with during your training in the first trimester. So placement often starts around December, January time. You need to start searching for a placement well before that. Obviously, we have relationships with placement providers, but we don't allocate you to placements. And that's quite an important point, and maybe a different point from other programs. We think it's really good training and practice for you to be actively a part of your placement decision-making process and application process, much as you would for any kind of job, because that sets you up really well for applying for jobs in future. So the way that the placement system operates is that we provide for you a number of potential placement options, and you can apply to as many of those as you want. You may or may not be successful, but you can, because it's a competitive process, but you can make, there's no limit to the number of applications you can make, and also you don't have to be limited to the placements that we suggest. You can't go literally anywhere, because obviously we have some requirements around what a placement consists of on the program in terms of its sort of governance and requirements to operate a sort of sound person-centered placement in stage one. But it's absolutely okay to find and suggest a potential placement, and we can support you with looking at whether that is a viable placement and setting it up with you for you if it turns out that it is. I appreciate that as an international student coming from overseas, many of you will be arriving in Scotland for the first time. And if that's the case, then obviously you don't have the kind of connections or knowledge or understanding, so that it's not that we expect you to run around finding it's not that easy to perhaps to find your own placement. But yes, it's certainly worth starting to think about that, starting to think about how you'll go about looking for a placement. Not only through what we we provide for you, or options we provide for you to apply to. So that's the sort of therapeutic element and training in person-centered therapy. Also in stage 1, there's a module called critical inquiry in counselling psychology, which is the sort of key elements underpinning counselling psychology and ethical practice. You undertake some supervision tutorials and personal development tutorials. You undertake major research project, both a systematic review and an empirical project in stage 1, as well as an analytical methods module to kind of, which is partly a refresher, but is an M-level module to make sure so that everyone's in the same place in terms of their understanding of research, which then carries you forward into the undertaking of a systematic review and empirical project within stage 1. So it's pretty busy in the first year in terms of research as well as in practice. So yeah, I want to say a bit more about stage 1 because obviously that's the thing that's closest. Very briefly, in stage 2, in terms of therapy models, you start learning cognitive behavioral therapy at the start of stage 2 and start to find placements that support that kind of practice. And it's not exclusively CBT, but you'll be adding CBT into the mix of what you're able to offer to your clients in stage 2. Stage 3, we don't introduce a new model as such therapeutically, but considering work with different modalities like couples, groups, etc. Perhaps children, there's a little bit of children, families, so different models, different different kinds of ways that we can undertake therapy, but also with slightly lighter touch, so different offshoots from the models that you've learned in stage 1 and 2. So there are sessions, for example, on dialectical behavior therapy. There's quite a significant input on schema therapy. So a focus through stage 2 and stage 3 is partly on working with more complex problems and difficulties and the sort of range of attitudes and techniques that we need and abilities that we need to bring in order to do that. What else is important to say? Maybe I should talk about the application process. So the deadline is about 2 or 3 weeks away. I think it's the 7th of March this year. And if we almost invariably fill our places from applications coming to that deadline. If on the very rare occasion that we might not, we would potentially reopen applications, but I certainly wouldn't count on that. It's been vanishingly rare in the last few years. We have a pretty high number of applications. As part of your application process, you need to write a 1,000-word essay, which is completely different from your personal statement. The essay should be structured as an academic essay with references. It's short, but we want to see some evidence of your writing ability within that work. It's really important to have some experience in a helping role. In applying to the program. There are several key reasons for that. I guess the most important one is, how do you know that this program and this career option is suitable for you? And if someone has little or no experience actually working, not necessarily therapeutically, but working with people in a kind of helping, caring capacity, and that there's very many different ways of doing that. Solving problems with people in terms of their physical or their mental health, their well-being. We want to see that you have substantial experience in that kind of area, in order you can see this program and the career that follows as something which is a kind of understandable deepening perhaps, of a role that you've undertaken before. And as part of the interview process, we will often ask you about your learning and sort of personal growth and development through the work that you've done to date. So we want to make sure that the program is well suited to you, as well as you being well suited to the program. So we don't want to have individuals spending a lot of money and coming into the program only to find that actually this really doesn't suit me at all. So that's a key thing to think about: the experience you've had, think about why you're undertaking the program, and the sort of trajectory of learning and development that your life has taken you on to this point, and that brings you here. So those are things which are often explored within the interview. And of course, you can write about that within your personal statement as well. A question. Myra, thank you. A teaching assistant role, not really. We'd want something a bit, first of all, with adults. So it's a good point you make about working with children. Primarily, the program is an adult-oriented program, so we do want to see that you have experience in a helping role with adults. If your experience and your desire is to work with children, then I'm not really sure this program would be the right choice. It's not that you can't work with children on the program, but we don't. It's not a primary focus of the training. We can support some placements with children and with families as well in stage 3. But the main focus of the training is adult. And if you'd undertake work with children, there's kind of more work to be done on your own behalf, really, with that, in terms of learning and adapting and thinking about how does this relate. How does what I'm learning relate to my work with children, and utilizing the placement for that purpose as well. So we want to see experience with adults, and so education is a bit different. We'd want to see a more in sort of health, well-being, perhaps physical health, perhaps mental health, but kind of solving those, in that kind of areas. Social care would be appropriate as well, but not really in education. Anything else to say about that? I'm not sure what else to say, but I'm glad to see there's some questions coming in. Question from Kajal. What modules or courses will be coming out? Well, there's a lot of modules, so I can't actually list them all. Kajal, bear in mind, it's not a PhD; it's a professional doctorate. So it is different in structure. It is a modular structure, whereas a PhD, a lot of a PhD is not modular, although some parts may be modular at MSc level. So there are, I think, about 6 modules in stage 1 and 4 or 5 in stages 2 and 3, covering things like research, therapeutic practice, professional development, these kind of areas. How soon can we start looking for placements? Some rare placements. Are there any? You will start looking for placements pretty much as soon as you start. There's enough time to find placement, at the outset of the program, but you will be getting on with it at that point. So we'll talk about that in the induction week and sort of get you going with in that direction with searching for placements at that point. Paid placements are not an option really in stage 1. That are almost entirely in stage 3, obviously, where students have more experience and are sort of on a par in stage 3 with qualified practitioners in say in another domain of practice where they've had undertaken a 1-year program and done some hours after that. So that the stage 3 students are in a bit of a different place in terms of their capacity to gain paid placements. Rarely it might happen in stage 2. That's most likely to happen perhaps when someone has some prior experience therapeutically before coming into the program. Why didn't we ask for a research proposal? We certainly look towards publishing, and encourage publication both in writing and also conference presentations. We have a lot of students presenting at the annual Counselling Psychology conference each year. We don't ask for a research proposal. It's difficult for me to compare with other programs because I don't know what other programs do. But as I said, the structure is not like a PhD. I think quite a lot of counselling psychology programs have a more of a PhD-like element sort of attached. So it's like shoehorning two different kind of programs together, a sort of practice side and then a substantial research PhD side. So this program is very different from that. The research is undertaken in a modular way. So you have a stage 1 element which stands alone, a stage 2 element which stands alone, and a stage 3 element which stands alone. Basically, they consist of, in stage 1, a systematic review and an empirical project, be 9,000 words altogether. In stage 2, it's a systematic review and a detailed project proposal, which is kind of shaped as a grant application, and that grant application is a proposal which then you're not applying for a grant, but it's shaped in that way in order to gain that sort of practice and understanding of what that looks like. But that shapes what you then do in stage 3, which is your major research project, which is 10,000 words. And quite a number of students achieve publications in one or more elements of those. Obviously, the systematic reviews are potentially publishable, and the empirical project in both stage 1 and stage 3 are potentially publishable. So we certainly want to encourage you in that direction. And in terms of why we don't ask for a proposal, we have it's a big department. We have a range of research interests. We pair you with supervisors near the start of the program, but largely that happens through you selecting a particular area or a particular topic or area of research where there has been something posted to you or posted online and what we call GCU Learn, where you're following, you're sort of stepping into an existing, not necessarily an existing project, but a project which a supervisor is willing to supervise, or an area of interest that is part of their wider research area. So that's the usual mechanism. It's not. It doesn't have to be the case. If you have a really strong idea that you wanted to follow up, then we can support that. But we don't. So there's a bit of a balance there between hooking into existing projects or existing research domains which are going on in the department, and versus sort of your own areas. And we can generally always find a reasonable match between those things, I think. When will the shortlist be released? I'm not quite sure what that question means. We don't release a shortlist. We after the, I think you're talking about the application process, Musing. So after the closing date, then we look through all the applications, and we will write to you to say, either invite you to interview or suggest that we can't do that at the moment. We might suggest you reapply. Something that may be very obvious, but is worth just mentioning before I go on to more questions. In order to apply for the program, you have to have eligibility for graduate basis for chartership with the British Psychological Society. Hopefully that's well known to all of you, but just occasionally it's not to someone, and we receive an application where someone, say, has an undergraduate degree in counselling or psychotherapy or something different, but you cannot apply to this program without having undertaken either a undergraduate degree in psychology that's recognised by the BPS or a recognised conversion program which grants eligibility for graduate basis for chartership. Okay, at what point does recognition for prior learning occur? We do that right at the start of the program, and technically you can do it just before, but we don't. We can give you some informal advice about whether it's likely or not, sort of at the point where if you're offered a place, we can have a discussion about that. But the actual mechanism takes place kind of at the start of the academic year. There was a sort of window of 2 weeks, a cut-off of 2 weeks into the program term. So it happens kind of in a rush, right at the start of the program, and perhaps in the week or two before, potentially. Anything to do with quantitative analysis and data, because I'm really bad at it. Well, I'm pretty awful at quantitative analysis and data also, so it's not necessarily a barrier. You will be, I mean, yes, of course, it's a necessary part of the program. There will be, within the analytical methods module, there'll be quite a lot on quantitative analysis and some work on quantitative analysis. But I mean, I guess it's an opportunity to sort of remedy some of the things that you have previously thought you're very bad at, and to improve those. Will the placements be set hours, or is each one different? E.g., will some offer only 10 hours a week and others offer 20? Yeah, it's pretty variable. In an ideal world, we'd have you on placement in a place of work for 2 days each week, 9 till 5. Supervision would be provided, and that would happen for 9 months in stage 1 and 10 months or so in stage 2 and stage 3. But the real world, unfortunately, just doesn't work quite like that. And placements start at different times, don't always start at the time we would like them to start. Some are relatively small and some are relatively large. So if they're small, it may be that you end up with 2 placements. Also, some placements now are entirely online, whereas not so long ago we didn't have any. Online placements weren't an option. Over the course of the whole program, up to 50% of your hours have to be face-to-face. So you have 450 client hours to gain over the course of the program. So 50% of those hours have to be face-to-face, but the other 50% can be online. It's generally easier, particularly in stage 1, to gain online experience. There's pros and cons of that. I wouldn't, do your best to find a face-to-face placement if you can, because it will offer a better, a more sort of integrated, feeling really in it opportunity. But yes, we have both kinds of placement are feasible, and there's huge variability in terms of how much the time the placement offers. Bear in mind, you're not just on placement. So a 20-hour placement doesn't equate to 20 client hours. It might equate to 4 or perhaps 5 client hours. Although not many placements would be 20 hours. It'd be 2 days is really the maximum we want you to do, because there's a lot of other things to do in the program. And we don't want, particularly at the start, it's important that you're not overburdened with client work. You need to sort of build that up slowly. Rebecca, if you have a master's degree in counselling psychology and working as a counsellor, do these hours count? You can look into RPL if you have a master's degree. There's lots of it depends in that, Rebecca. And no hours would count from prior to the program unless you were given direct entry into stage 2 of the program. So you're missing out stage 1 entirely. That is, I've never actually seen that happen unless someone has done stage 1 at GCU and they've left and have come back. They've left with a master's degree, but then maybe a couple of years later they've chosen to come back to complete the doctorate. So I can't think of any situation where that's happened with someone doing a master's in counselling psychology elsewhere, and that's sort of largely because of some peculiarities around our particular module structure, which makes it quite difficult for that sort of equivalence to be demonstrated. Also, many courses don't offer substantial person-centered practice or any person-centered practice, and because that's our core model in the program, then having strong experience in that within a counselling psychology program is essential. So if that all sounds like, oh, that's me, then you can explore that through the RPL process, and it's not impossible that you could gain direct entry to stage 2, but as I said, it's for a range of reasons it's pretty unlikely. Another reason being that you have to have undertaken both a systematic review and an empirical project at master's level. Reese, what is the practicality of taking this program while also having to work part-time? As an international student, then you can't undertake the program part-time, which I realize is not your question, but just to mention that you have to be on the program full-time as an international student, and which is obviously different for home students who can undertake it part-time. It's not, so I guess it depends on visa restrictions. It's not impossible to do some work in theory. Whether a visa permits that is a whole other question, and the amount of work that is reasonable to undertake in the program, given that it is a full-time program, is something to be really quite cautious about. Ria, hi. I'd like to know. Gosh, I don't really know how to answer that question, Ria. Well, I think we're fantastic, but I'm biased. How will this be reflected in the? Well, I think we're a pretty cutting-edge program. We produce graduates who go out to work in counselling psychology in the NHS, in independent settings, in third sector settings, in higher education. I think the standard that GCU as a whole has displayed is certainly reflected both in the sort of quality of experience within the program, both in teaching and in placement, but also in kind of what students are then equipped to go on to do. Shuan, I'm sorry, I'm not sure which name I should be saying there. How about the weekly time commitment in stage 1? I've heard it's quite intensive. It is quite intensive. You're usually on campus on a Thursday and Friday during trimester A and trimester B. Having said that, that's only 22 weeks. The trimesters are 11 weeks long. And so obviously that's, it's less than half of the year that you're on campus for 2 days a week. But you are also then expected, as of, say, December, January, to be on placement for a couple of days a week. When I say on placement, that includes things like, note taking, having supervision for your practice, reading to support your placement practice. It doesn't mean that it's 2 days of sitting in front of clients, but it's everything associated with your placement, and if hopefully being able to do things on placement or within the placement organization other than simply seeing clients. That may be attending meetings, shadowing other colleagues or professionals, possibly setting up sort of mini programs or courses, or writing materials for use by clients or by other staff. So there's lots of potential activities which may be undertaken on placement beside client work. Back to the time commitment, then the research element is pretty intense in stage one. There's a lot to do. You also have assignments through the year, and so yes, it when we talk about the program being full time, full time means essentially 35 hours a week, and I would say that's pretty accurate. So you need to think about your capacity to undertake other things outside the program in the context of this being really a full-time thing. Amelia asks, what do the typical hours of a day look like? I'm just trying to make sure I count for commuting time. Typically 9 till 5 on Thursdays, and Fridays I think you finish a bit earlier, but on both days you start at 9. Charmy, I'm currently in my last semester of Masters in Clinical Psychology with relevant experience in the BPS membership. I have already applied for the course. I look forward to a response from the college. Does Glasgow prefer extensive counselling psychology experience? No, we don't expect counselling psychology experience in any sense. We expect interest, understanding, aptitude, some sense, some knowledge of what counselling psychology is, but we certainly don't expect you to have experience in counselling psychology. Yeah, that's straightforward. Reese, once this program is complete, what other steps are required to become a CBT practitioner? I'm guessing that reads. Well, you are a CBT practitioner on exiting the program. That's one of the models that you are then qualified to practice as a counselling psychologist. If you want to apply, so in terms of there's nothing else that you need to do. If you want to go further in CBT specifically, then you could apply for membership with the BABCP, which is the British Association for Cognitive Behavioural Therapies, and they're the sort of the principal, not the only, but the principal governing body for CBT practitioners. But that's a sort of entirely different ballpark from psychology practitioners. So they're not statutory to be a member of the BABCP. You don't need to be a psychologist. They're not registered by statute in the way that psychologists are. But some people choose to follow that membership because of their particular interest in CBT and because of the high standards of that organization, which obviously is absolutely fine. If you want to supervise a CBT practitioner who is training within the BABCP, then you need to be a BABCP registered supervisor. But so that there are some ways in which becoming registered with that organization as well as with the BPS and HCPC could be useful if CBT is your thing. But yeah, it's by no means required. Priyam, will we have opportunities in teaching leadership during our training? Yes, and largely I was talking about that really in terms of placements. We want you to play a really active role and varied role in your placements. Some placements permit that more than others, and perhaps as you progress through the program, it becomes more apparent or more obvious. But what we really don't want, we're very clear both to students as well as to placement staff, placement educators, that we don't just want you to be in a placement seeing clients and out the door. That's not the sole role of counselling psychologists or counselling psychology training. We want you to be actively involved in maybe putting on workshops or courses or writing these things, delivering materials maybe to staff groups as well as to service users. So there's quite a lot of ways in which these things can be demonstrated, and it is actually a requirement that they're demonstrated during the training. There is an assessment which includes that kind of teaching leadership working. Take a breath. I seem to be at the bottom of the questions.
One more for you, Richard. Hang on.
Okay.
And just now, it was just in the main chat. There you go.
So what other approaches will be included in the program except CBT? Well, the core model of the program is person-centered therapy. So that's what you're learning through stage 1. In stage 2, and you start learning CBT. CBT obviously is its own thing, but it also has lots of branches and has progressed in various different ways. And as we progress through stage 2 and into stage 3, we start exploring some of those branches, as well as in stage 3, the particular branch of person-centered therapy, which is emotion-focused therapy. So stage 2, we have a 2-day workshop in schema therapy, and then a further 2 days in stage 3, as that's a sort of key integrative model which has sort of strong roots in CBT, but not solely in CBT. We have sessions on compassion-focused therapy, dialectical behavior therapy, and as I was talking about earlier, alongside the focus on models, to some extent there is a focus on different models, but apart from person-centered therapy and CBT and perhaps schema therapy, they're not in massive depth. But a different way of thinking about that really is about complexity and how we work with sort of more intractable client difficulties. And so the sort of path of the program beyond those two key models is thinking about how we bring a range of our abilities to bear on, and how we match different tools with different kinds of problem. So there's quite a significant trauma focus, for example. There's a strand on neuropsychology. There's workshops on working with people diagnosed with psychosis, with bipolar disorder, with eating disorders. So we're looking at the sort of problem focus and working with complexity alongside the sort of how different models may inform us about these areas.
Another one just copied in there for you, Richard.
Thanks, Hannah. So Priyam asks, what kind of support accommodations does the program have in place for students with learning disabilities? We would strongly encourage anyone to seek the support of the disability service in the first instance. We try and make materials as accessible as possible. The thing, when a student gets in touch with the disability service, what they do is provide what's called a recommended adjustment page, which is then distributed to module leaders. So that's the most important step, really, because we can't, without that, we have no way of knowing what accommodations we might need to make. So the disability service is the sort of fulcrum, or the sort of middle person, if you like, where your needs are discussed with them and how those needs may impact on your learning and what that means for the kind of learning that is undertaken within the program. And they, in agreement with you, they will write out the recommended adjustment page, which is, if you like, a message to the program staff of these kind of adjustments are needed for this particular student. So at the beginning of each year, we receive a bunch of these, what we call wraps, and make sure that we are able to meet those. Just while you're thinking, if you have any questions, I'll think if there's anything else I might say. Personal therapy is a requirement through the program. You have to undertake a minimum of 40 hours of personal therapy, of which 15 need to be in your first year. So that's a reasonably substantial expense, and but is really important. Maybe a more subjective expense in stage 1. It's more likely that you're going to have to pay externally for supervision. That some placements provide supervision, and that's very much our preference. That's placements provide supervision, but unfortunately, that's least likely to happen in stage 1. It's much more possible, likely, in stage 2 and stage 3. So that's something else which you need to take into account in terms of the expenses of the program. You have a client to supervision ratio of 1 to 6, or the other way around, supervision to client ratio, client supervision 1 to 6, supervision to client of 1 to 6, and then 1 to 8 in stages 2 and stage 3. And that's a minimum ratio. We expect you to have supervision, really a minimum of fortnightly. And if you are seeing more than 6 clients over that fortnight, it would need to be more than that. But we wouldn't, if you don't have many clients, it doesn't mean you sort of scale back supervision to monthly or something like that. It's really, it's not appropriate, particularly at the beginning of your therapy journey.
Just checking, Richard, did you get Megna's question? That one, or?
Oh, sorry, hang on.
No, is that one there?
I've got, sorry, Myra and Megna.
Yes.
So Myra, first of all, voluntary work is concerned. Yes, voluntary work is absolutely fine. So some people work on substantial work on helplines, like in the UK on Samaritans, for example. So it doesn't have to be paid work. Do you have any suggestions on how we can prepare for the interview? Areas that couldn't reflect on. I would think about your, depending on how long it is since you did your undergraduate or a master's, then I'll be thinking about your research experience on one or both of those courses, particularly if it's some time ago and you need to sort of refresh your memory about that. I would be thinking about counselling psychology, why you're interested in it and what it means to you and what it is. I would be thinking about person-centered therapy and what's the significance of that for you. I would be thinking about the experience you've gained in work, whether voluntary or paid, in a helping role, and how that has. How you developed through that, how that has prepared you for this kind of course and career.
I think that's all of them, I hope. Pretty sure I got everyone's questions throughout the course of the chat, but there's obviously been quite a few, so if anything's been missed, just let us know just now. But failing that, quite a few people have said thank you already, Richard, in the main chat, and that it's all been very helpful information. So I think that's a good sign. If there's no other questions, then I think we are free to say yes. So a few people have been asking about the recording. Of course, I will send out the recording to everyone so that you've got a copy of it and you can refer back to all the answers that Richard's given to all of your questions. Also, just to mention that if you have any further questions that haven't been answered, or if you've got anything more generic that you want to find out about to do with GCU, please feel free just to get in touch with us on inquiries@gcu.ac.uk. But all that's left to say is a huge thank you to Richard for giving up his time and for answering all of those questions, because I realise that your throat will probably be sore after that, Richard. But thank you so much. That's been a really, really helpful and insightful webinar. And yes, the recording will be sent out in due course. So all that's left to say is have a great day, everyone. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you very much. I look forward to seeing your applications.
Yes, absolutely. Thanks, everyone.
Okay. Bye
Bye.
now.